I was in a panel discussion last week where the moderator said at this stage, sorry, no time for questions. But no, this is such an interesting topic. Finding the common denominator here other than the human being is a bit of a challenge, but the challenge are varied here from a multicultural environment where you're faced with a situation where there aren't really employees out there, the skill pool is low, to an environment where we are embarking on automation and upskilling, to an environment where intergenerational approach is challenged by ever faster change out there, and then an environment where you put your employees out of their comfort zone, really, to some degree, through Agile. These are all very interesting aspects in a workforce that the question is, who do you actually ask before you come to the conclusion, this is the approach we take? Who are the stakeholders that you refer to when it is about time to do things differently, to bring about change, to do what you do?
Okay. That's a very good question, but I think it's a real journey. I think I look at the ports as eventually being a technology village. But it's about how you bring that about. And what we've engaged is futurists. In fact, we have a company in the States called Kedge who we engage, and we've got nearly 70 people trained in what we call future foresight. So the people in those areas are actually defining what the future will be. And amongst those are the youth of today who've got very different views in terms of what and how it should be done. But it's really about creating that culture of innovation and future thinking, and that will bring about change, because that's the only way you actually get the support that you need to actually get there.
Thank you, Tony. Amanda, any insights from your perspective?
I think that's a great answer. We're not clever enough to have a futurist involved at the moment, but we'll get onto that. But one of the things, certainly engaging the younger people, but engaging customers and looking ahead and looking outside of New Zealand internationally is important. I think having that creative kind of interest and curiosity is really important. So whether that be in your sustainability and CSR teams or whether it's in your HR department, you need people that are going to think beyond today.
How do you combine that intergenerational approach with these changing demands?
Well, there's a number of ways in terms of when you're a family business, and some of us have, in my own household, there are 4 generations, so we're challenged by that every night we come home. But secondly, from an organisation point of view, our families are actually connected into their local communities or their local marae, so we have regular neighbourly or neighbourhood catch-ups. We have regular events, etc. But one of the things we've been doing over the past 10 years is taking some of our young people and sending them off to Sanford or off to international schools. And over this past 3 years, we've been taking groups of 13 and 14-year-olds into Silicon Valley, and those who have a specific interest in STEM. And the reason we're taking 13 and 14-year-olds is because they are at that point in their lives where they haven't actually thought about the NCA topics. We're immersing them not only in the excitement and the innovation of actually what's going on across the world, but also we're continuing that on with pastoral care and support, and actually bringing them through on other local and regional events so that they step into leadership opportunities when we have those events, either locally, regionally, or even annually. So we've got this sort of pipeline of young people who we don't only want to see at the flex routes, we want to see them up the food chain. And it's one of the things we've got about 700 staff right across all of our commercial sector. We've got 55% of those staff are actually Ngāi Tahu. So we actually want to continue to build that opportunity.
Thank you. Claire, you described the path towards Agile quite clearly and why that would make sense. you also hear that it was basically McKinsey that told you that's the right thing to do.
I can assure you I was well interested in the topic way before I met anyone from McKinsey. You know, like for me, I'm a hands-on learning person, and I learn by doing, like many of us do. And so the early experiments we had in our ways of working were the start of our conversation. But sometimes you need some help to see beyond what you know. And one of the things that we were really fortunate to be able to do with McKinsey's was go and visit some other customers or some other customers of theirs internationally who'd taken this journey. And I think without that, we possibly would not have made the decision as a whole leadership team to take the move. So I think when you talk about stakeholders, one of the sets of stakeholders, if you're going to do something really bold, and if you're really going to try and make it possible for everyone to engage, by necessity, this idea of moving from a role-based hierarchy to a purpose-driven hierarchy is that someone has to give something up. So if you cannot, as a team, commit to changing things as they affect yourselves, that stakeholder group's really important. You can't ignore them. So they have to believe there's something worthwhile in that in order to come out to the other side, that they will actually do that. So I think that's something to think about.
I can imagine that just by listening to younger people these days and their search for that fulfillment of purpose, that self-fulfillment, that Agile moves into the direction where they probably feel I can live myself out in a different environment. This is not a hierarchy. I am actually participating in decision-making here, and I'm contributing. On the other hand, in other areas, we are faced with young people that come into a management style that has been the same for decades, and the assumption might be they'll leave after 2 years. They'll come in, they'll earn some money, they gain experience, and then move on. Would that be a situation you're facing, Tony? Or?
We have had experience like that as well, but what we did, we've got a program of work where we've got youngsters who've come in and we've got 5 graduates who actually are spending 6 months in each department and writing what they think will be future state, and they're reverse mentoring the management team. Now that's quite a challenge. But what it does make you do is actually look through a different lens when you make a decision.
Yeah.
Just from our perspective, in terms of how we look at leadership frameworks are starting to change. So we are actually quite a traditional business model, very autocratic leadership styles, and what we're trying to do is flip that around and have a very keen focus on servant leadership. So that's empowering our people to make good decisions, not making them for them or telling them what to do. And it's, I believe my role as a leader to take the obstacles out of the way and let my people be the best they can be. So, those are the types of things that we're thinking about when we're thinking about leadership programs now. We're not trying to teach the manager style, we're trying to teach the servant leadership. So, and that's really going to be important for harnessing youth.
Would you like to comment on that question?
When I think about young people leaving, you never leave your whakapapa. Yeah. So you never leave your family or your cultural intergenerational history. What we want is for our young people to acknowledge a sense of where they need to be now and in the future. And if that means exploring those opportunities I shared with you earlier, from educating, training, being part of other organisations and internships, going overseas, etc., they will always come home. And if they don't come home now, we're staying connected with them wherever they are around the world. And the fantastic thing about Māoridom is that they are connected through to those at the haukainga or those keeping the home fires burning. So there is always a sense of relationship and connection. What we want to do is actually enable them to come back and actually participate at the leading level. So that's something we've got to continue to keep working upon.
Excellent. I've been fortunate enough to have been invited to the workshop where Spark introduced Agile Management 2 or 3 months ago at your lab, Spark Lab, which was interesting and certainly opened a lot of questions. What I found great about that was your willingness to open up and to share your experience, and to actually then also say, and over time, you're welcome to come and see how this works for us and talk to people. I'm sure there are many businesses out there who are not going to embark on Agile because it just doesn't fit into that kind of environment. A factory, for example, where you manufacture, or a casino. How do we provoke more collaboration in order to come to a better outcome for all of us being faced with very similar situations here? A wave of young people who look for something very different in their lives than what we traditionally have to offer. So you have got a great example of how you go about it, but Tony, what would we do in a manufacturing or logistics environment?
Well, I think that that logistics environment is being digitalized as quickly as you can blink today. So that requires a complete different set of competencies and a different type of vision and a different sort of application, which has implications across the organisation, from the CEO down to people on the shop floor. So what you are looking at is, in our environment, a different type of person to come in and manage. And I won't say you just need people that are coming in and eating algorithms, but effectively that's what's going to happen. So again, that's why the retraining, and I think we're also very conscious about how we are being successful with the retraining. And I didn't mention before, but we've got 4 stevedores now being trained in IT. We've got 8 people, they wanted to be retrained in truck drivers. We've put a whole executive union team through a situational leadership 2 course where we found a couple of stars and we've promoted them. So, you know, there is a lot of hope, but there is a lot of change, and change is inevitable.
Very good. And there's opportunity for collaboration to actually identify across companies what others are doing in order to...
Absolutely, yes.
That's excellent. I would like to give others the opportunity to ask questions or... Yes, please.
My question is primarily for Anahita. You talk about the intergenerational piece. I'm doing this work on workforce development for a sector in the primary sector. And interestingly, what we're finding in talking to the industry and to the institutions who train people for the industry is that parents are a huge barrier to young people making choices that are aligned with their fit as a personality and as a propensity towards particular skills. And so I'm interested to know whether you have had any experience of, you know, when you take the 13 or 14-year-olds to Sanford, do you take their parents too? And how do you stop that influence that parents can have that's often really holding young people back from seeing the world as it really is, not the world that their parents have worked in, and seeing the possibilities for them to take a different path and not all become bloody lawyers?
So a great question, thank you, because you know there's that old sort of home mantra as a parent, we just want the best for our children. And quite often in the eyes of the child or the young person and the influences and the changes that are going on for them today, that's actually quite different to myself as a parent or even as a grandparent. So one of the things that we have focused on over these last 2 or 3 years is really going out and doing a lot of engagement events right across the country and right across Australia. And we've actually engaged with about 2,500 family members this year around looking at those sorts of opportunities, such as the Silicon Valley. We've got a group going off to University of Hawaii in October, 13 and 14-year-olds, looking at water and the sustainability aspects of that. So when we are talking about these sorts of opportunities, we're engaging the whole family. And there is a real excitement and a joy from families who haven't actually participated with their iwi. So there are a number of dimensions. There is actually about building cultural connection. It's about seeing your child or your grandchild being involved with an iwi that as a parent, maybe you had to go away and work somewhere and you're not as connected with the iwi. So there are these sorts of many opportunities. There are events, there are scholarships, there are bursaries, there are internships. So we're trying to sort of infiltrate so many dimensions. That means mum and dad and grandparents, aunties and uncles can actually celebrate that their child or their grandchild is actually one of the young people that are going off to Sanford or going off to the University of Hawaii, or many other sorts of opportunities that exist around our country. We're also engaged on looking at but for the last 10 years we've been running Outward Bound, or what we call Aoraki Bound, and we've actually partnered with some of the organisations in here. And all of those sorts of experiences mean that parents start to move with where their child or their grandchild is at.
Thank you, Aurelia. Unfortunately, we can't have any more questions. We've run out of time, but I'm sure that all the panelists will be available during the drink session for questions individually. Please help me in thanking them for the contribution.